Age 14 to 21, and here we come to the middle of the first Saturn cycle. Every middle is like a full moon a little bit. Actually, it's like a full moon a lot, because we have all the signs of an astrological opposition. Saturn is now sitting on the opposite side to where it was by birth. And that symbolically is creating a very specific kind of tension. We all know the proverbial crisis of puberty, which will then repeat itself one more time in a different way, the crisis of the second puberty, when we reach the same stage of that cycle the second time around 42. But now we're here, so just have in your mind that whatever goes wrong here, and a lot can go wrong here, this is a very critical age, can have its repercussions later on in the 40s. So again, we need to go through a crisis of a sort. We are being tested. We are also being helped or prevented to do what we are supposed to do in this age. Because at the end of the day, Saturn as an external force is not just this internal clock of growth. It is also what other people either manage or don't manage to do with their Saturns and with their charts in general, with their lives in general, that affect you directly, especially during the first cycle of Saturn. The first cycle of Saturn is called by Dane Woodyer the so-called past. The past because we are dealing through each one of the first 4 steps. We're dealing with conditioning. Even if we're rebellious, and now at the 3rd stage we are trying to identify how we differ from everybody else, mainly through relationships. Here is where we start seeking love for the sake of love during puberty, again like a way to test our individuality, and having somebody to relate to, looking for meaningful relationships now. We are hoping, without even knowing it, to understand what we are about, what we like. We are actually trying to make a choice, and choices in this age can be clouded by so many external influences, especially by peers, because now the child is trying to separate from parents. The opposition is a symbol of whatever my initial conditioning by Saturn was, I now want to be counter to that. I now want to show the world how I'm just the opposite to that, even though I remain just as connected to that conditioning as I ever have been, by trying to negate it or trying to kind of oppose it, because I'm still not really an independent individual leading my life, but I'm comparing and contrasting in this particular age. And this is the deep meaning of any opposition. 2 forces or 2 people or 2 planets seeing each other in a mirror, and only in that way realizing not only what they are dealing with out there, and now they need to comply with something, because in the previous period 7 to 14 the child was very egocentric. The playing, the experimentation, the challenges with others, they were mostly focused inward. You know, what the child feels about every situation, almost like it's a journey, an adventure of the person himself or herself. Now with puberty, with the opposition, we cannot remain blind of others. So, or in other words, we wake up for the fact that they were others for the first time, and we get interested in them. We get interested in the opposite sex, and we get interested in how we are reflected in the mirror of other people. So there comes the pressure of showing something individual in an interesting, creative, and attractive way. Can you see now what's the sextile of Uranus doing here? This is the second Uranus step, or actually the 3rd step. Now it's at 60 degrees from its original place. And the first sextile is spontaneous, fiery self-expression. And that sort of self-expression requires an exercise of the brain. So you're testing how smart you are, you're testing how communicative you are in this age. And that's one way to grow and to emerge. But one way to be restricted and bound and taught a lesson is through the opposition of Saturn, running at the same time, where you start demanding things but the world is saying no to you. Or you start desiring new things but the world may not always want to give it to you unless you now realize that you need to do something in order to get it, to do something yourself. So what happens during that period is also on another parallel turning point. Age 19 is when the lunar nodes are completing their first cycle, this other major cycle of 19 years. During this little 7-year section that we are exploring now is when it will come back to its same place for the first time, and maybe it will mark the beginning of some sort of self-realization, which is one new step into, as we can say, realizing your own personal destiny, as the lunar nodes are about the meeting point between your distant past and your current life task or situation that you need to work through.